Yo, Vlasuo here. Lately there's been a lot of controversy around what build or what runes are best on Yasuo, with people constantly arguing and debating and giving all sorts of suggestions. I've taken some time to experiment everything, and I think I have a pretty good idea on what's best and when to build specific items, so let's get to it. This is mostly gonna be a guide for Yasuo on mid lane, but some of the suggestions can definitely be applied to top lane and bot lane. Just overall, this is my opinion on Yasuo mid. First and foremost, let's start off with the runes. Since most of the time you will be facing ranged opponents or champs you can't really engage in combat with most of the time, your standard rune page should be this. Fleet Footwork as the keystone. By far the best keystone for Yasuo right now, as not only does it fit with the style that he wants to play, which is very slippery and likes having move speed, it also provides great sustain, and since you want to start Doran Blade pretty much every single game nowadays, we'll talk later about why that's the case, you will need that little bit of extra sustain from anywhere you can get it, especially against champs that have constant poke, such as Tristana, Akshan, Corki, etc. Moving on, the next rune you should take is by far Absorb Life. It is insanely consistent, it does the same thing every game, you will never feel like this rune was useless or bad. It pretty much just allows you to stay on lane as much as you want to, until you get the best recall possible for yourself. It was added in the new split, and I feel like it's actually overperforming. I would say it's probably even better for top lane than mid lane, since mid lane is a bit of a less scary role, and you can kind of get away with playing from range and just walking in only for XP. Meanwhile, top lane, if you're not healthy, you will get run down. And especially as a champion with no mana like Yasuo, it's always nice to be able to just out-sustain your opponent. After that, obviously, Legend Alacrity, still the best one. Attack speed is needed more than ever right now, and Bloodline just doesn't give you as much lifesteal as it would be worth it to give up the attack speed that you get in the early game. And finishing off the precision tree here, I would say that Cut Down has been performing quite well from my experience, and apparently it's getting buffed next patch, so I would highly recommend trying it. Also, I consider quite important to be able to put your opponent low on health as early and as easy as you can, especially on mid lane, since most champions don't really have infinite sustain, and if you put them low HP, they're either under gank threat, dive threat, or you can just move around the map quite easily because you have priority over them. But last stand is also an option, especially more against melee fights and melee team comps where you are bound to get low health while fighting. And for the secondary tree, it's still gonna be Resolve as we're used to. Second Wind, probably most of the time when you're gonna run Fleet Footwork for the just absurd amount of sustain. Nobody will be able to take you out of lane. And most consistent second rune is Overgrowth, just really good for just some extra HP to be a bit tankier in teamfights and stuff like that, and even on side lane. And maybe Revitalize can also be considered if your team has an Ivern or Lulu Soraka, something like that, especially if you go bot lane with them. And the rune shards stay the same: attack speed, adaptive force, and scaling HP. Maybe if you play bot lane you can take the flat HP since you're leveling a bit slower and maybe you want to get that extra power in the early game. Overall, those are your options. Definitely I would say the most consistent one is just Fleet Footwork plus Absorb Life plus Alacrity plus Cut Down plus Second Wind plus Overgrowth. But in the case that you're facing, for example, a bruiser or a tank mid lane, or you're just playing top lane into such champions, I could highly recommend going Conqueror. I think it provides great power in 1v1s, especially early levels. It can give you that extra edge to actually get ahead of your opponent. And it will also end up healing you a little bit when fully stacked. Pairing that with Bone Plating instead of Second Wind in the Resolve tree will just make you a much better, stronger fighter and some stuff like that. That being said, I also tried Press the Attack and have seen people take it, but I really can't see the benefits of it over Conqueror. The only time it outperforms Conqueror is exactly when you proc that 3 auto attack in a trade. As for extended fights, it does pretty much as much damage as Conqueror, except Conqueror actually will start healing you for a bit while at max stacks. I tested it in practice tool, and no matter the early game, late game, mid game, an all-in will always provide the same DPS with Conqueror or with PTA, on Yasuo at least. Also, one thing that pisses me off is that you can't gain a PTA stack if you Q through the minion wave as Yasuo. You want to do that quite a lot, since it doesn't draw minion aggro whenever you hit your opponent with a Q through the minion wave. So it's a really important mechanic. To me, it just feels like a complete turn off and really sucks. Alright, Now that we got that out of the way, let's go off and rant about items. So, starting off with the starting items, ever since they buffed Doran's Blade and all the Doran's items, I feel like they added so many more stats to this item compared to Doran's Shield. I feel like I would never want to be put in a position to be forced to buy Doran's Shield over this, as it just gives me an additional 10 AD and 3.5% lifesteal, as they changed it recently, which is way better for Yasuo than Physical Vamp, which was reduced by AoE abilities such as Yasuo Q. Lifesteal applies directly to the first target that you hit and fully gives you the lifesteal for it. So pretty much it just outscales Doran's Shield 100% of the games, and the only time I would ever go Doran's Shield is if you really are running a different page rather than the one that I recommended with Fleet Footwork, Absorb Life and Second Wind, where you would just need that additional sustain to survive lane and just stay on lane as much as possible. I personally run that every game I need to and just go Doran Blades because it scales better, and that's what you want to do usually, and not buy suboptimal items for your suboptimal rune choice. And definitely you want to sell Doran Blade very late into the game and keep it as much as possible. Otherwise the whole point of buying it was thrown out the window, since this item is pretty much 1000 gold worth of stats. Now for first recall, usually what you want to do is buy a lot of daggers as well as boots. Or if you can afford, obviously, tier 2 boots, attack speed boots, you go for that, especially if you're in a winning position. But considering that now Phantom Dancer gives a lot of attack speed, which we'll get into later, it might actually be a very viable option, and I've tried this a couple of times, to just ignore finishing the tier 2 boots, just go for tier 1 boots, and go for Zeal, into Phantom Dancer finish, into maybe even IE, and then you go back to buying the new boots that you need. And I want to recommend these boots only if you really think they will provide insane value, because ruining a bit of early game, such as not buying Berserker's Greaves on your first back, it's just not worth it unless these boots that you're gonna buy later are gonna provide you insane value. So I would say into full AD teams, plated steel caps all the way. I would say into high CC teams and full AP teams, mercs are great. And I would even recommend Boots of Swiftness if pretty much the situation is that your team has no frontline and almost no knockups. Meanwhile, the enemy team also has very high range champions and poke champions, and you really struggle to get in that team and to just fight. So this just provides extra movement, extra strength against slows, and it's also cheap. So yeah, pretty much unless you really think some of these boots are overpowered in your game, then you just go for tier 2 attack speed boots. Then you want to go Zeal and finish PD. Now a lot of people are complaining that attack speed boots into Phantom Dancer, or just in general Phantom Dancer first item, just feels not good enough and that you're not dealing damage. And partially that's true, but you gotta remember that this item is worth 2.6k. It's like insanely cheap, and it does give you the crit chance that you need. It will put you to 50% crit chance, which is what Yasuo enjoys anyway. And the fact that it gives 12% move speed is absolutely insane to me. Like, this amount of move speed is unreal. We already have a power creep in move speed, and this just takes it to the next level, so not abusing it just feels completely int to me. It gives you 6 daggers worth of attack speed as well. So just rushing this first, considering it's cheap, I just think it's great. And especially pairing this with Fleet Footwork and just moving around the map, roaming or taking any fights. Yes, you are slightly weaker in an all-in than if you were to buy Kraken Slayer, obviously. But that brings me to my next point, which is, do you care so much about your first item spike rather than the rest of the game? Because I see people try first item Blade of the Ruined King, first item Kraken Slayer, maybe even with Zeal, and that can work. There are definitely situations in which that's the right choice, but most of the games we're talking about here, the most consistent one is gonna be PD into IE. This one gives a lot of attack speed, move speed also great, gives the crit chance, unlike Kraken Slayer and BOTRK, which don't have crit chance, which Yasuo really likes because of his ultimate, because of his Q. And this one gives a hell of a lot of AD. So you have a hell of a lot of attack speed with a hell of a lot of AD. What else do you need? And just like building boots and then Zeal and then Kraken Slayer, which by the way gives no crit, it just feels like you're scaling never. And now I don't want to act like Yasuo is the best scaling champion in the game, but I do want to say that the most consistent build is the one that will not handicap you to reach your true power spike. Because if you go Boots, Zeal into Kraken Slayer, you will get your Infinity Edge much later and not even with 100% crit chance, if that was your second item, and it should be. And to me, that just feels horrible. You're basically having a way worse second item spike to have a way better first item spike. And I just don't think it's worth it. And if you get used to using Phantom Dancer, trust me, you will actually enjoy it. Especially with Fleet Footwork, you're basically just never getting out-sustained by anyone almost. And you just move like a freak and you can roam and not lose CS because you have an insane move speed. You can just go in and out of fights much easier than you usually can as Yasuo. Like, typically you get CC'd, you can't get out of a fight. Typically, you just ult in, you can't get out of the fight. Now, with Boots, PD, and Fleet Footwork, you're just so much safer and you can just do so much more. The champion loves move speed, the champion loves a lot of attack speed, and the champion loves crit chance. So this is the perfect item. I've also done a lot of, let's say, buying boots, and on my next back, I, for example, had like 2000 gold, which is not enough to finish PD, but it is enough, for example, to buy a BF sword out of the Infinity Edge, and the rest daggers, or maybe even Zeal plus Infinite, or Zeal plus BF Sword. And that isn't bad at all, by the way, because the fact that you recalled with so high gold probably means that you just got so ahead by taking some random fights around the map that maybe now you actually want to have some damage. So buying a BF Sword is always good. I can recommend it. If you have the money for it and you're ahead, just make sure you have boots of attack speed and a few daggers maybe as well. Now, as your third item, if you're going for this build path, most consistent will be Bloodthirster, but obviously this is very, very dependent on how the game is going and what the team comps are. If they are a lot of squishies and it's easy for you to hit them a lot, that makes sense, right? You would want to go Bloodthirster, you deal a lot of damage, you heal a lot. In the case that you're struggling to hit them, then we have all of the other options, which is Lord Dominic's Regards if they have a tank that you need to kill, Death Stance if you really need to get one kill and then you're gonna pretty much win the fight after that one kill. Obviously Mercurial Scimitar for any CCs, as well as this now gives lifesteal, which is really nice. It gives Magic Wrist as well, don't forget about that. Deadman's Plate for even more move speed if you really think you need it, but I would say most consistent armor item is Randuin Omen. They buffed the hell out of the armor, and sure, they removed one of the passives, which was decent. Not amazing for a champ like Yasuo that doesn't really have a lot of health, but it was good. But you still get the critical strike deals less damage to you passive, which, let's be honest, there's gonna be an ADC in every game, pretty much. And even without an ADC, by the way, there's also high chances of it being 2 ADCs, since people are playing Tristana, Corki, Collector Champions, Rengar, stuff like that. There's gonna be crit champs. Either way, it gives 75 armor for a very low price. It's a really good item. I can also recommend Iceborne Gauntlet. It's a great item as well. Mainly use this for like perma slowing the bruisers that want to get to you, for example. And yeah, there's the tank items that you might need. Sterak's for surviving, just like some burst damage that you really... Like, for example, true damage is a damage type you can't itemize against. There's no armor, there's no MR that can save you. There's no Death Stance can't save you. Obviously, Sterak's can give you an extra shield and extra health that could save you. Nikiruken against a lot of magic damage. Can be good against poke mages, or also can be good against stuff like Evelynn to not get that burst on and one-shot you. And yeah, Spirit Visage is also an option. Less magic resist, but increases the effectiveness of healings. Obviously, this is better with Bloodthirster and Death Stance, for example, if you were to pair as a 5 item. Now I want to talk about the early game choices. I wouldn't say that going PD, IE and Bloodthirster is optimal every single game. I'm just saying that this is the most consistent one, and this one you should look forward to build every single game. But there are games with exceptions. For example, if you're facing a melee such as Sylas or Echo or Irelia, the type of champions that just go into you and can't really get out, then you want to take an item that actually provides more DPS. And obviously you're looking at Kraken Slayer first thing. I would definitely say try to buy Zeal before Kraken Slayer, and then yes, Infinity Edge, and then finish Zeal into PD. Only thing that I hate about this item path is that you'd feel really bad if you don't finish Phantom Dancer, since you will have around 90% crit chance, or I think 80. So it kind of forces you to go triple squishy items, whereas going PD IE doesn't really force you into this. Bloodthirster third item, this is not a crit item. You don't need it anymore since you already have 100% crit. This is just like a comfort item and really good and just profits Yasuo a lot. But you can go a tank item. Here, staying in the game with 80% crit chance just feels absolutely terrible, and yes, just go for this if you really think you're just gonna out DPS your front line and just win with straight up damage. And then there's the case where you face tanks. Which is obviously, or not tanks necessarily, but champions with very high health, such as like Swain, Vladimir, Renekton. Blade of the Kraken Rush is good, naturally. It makes sense. It also gives you sustain, which is nice. You won't have to buy like lifesteal later or something like that. And just going this and Infinity Edge into LDR or LDR second if there is stacking armor. If you're facing that tank that I was talking about that is just stacking armor like a freak, just go LDR second and then IE. But I want you to make sure that you're not just building this as soon as you see a tank on the enemy team, because that's just not how Yasuo works. You should not be focusing on killing the tank. But if there are more tanks, or if your job is to stay on side lane and pressure that tank, then this build, it might just be it. And obviously for high health targets, you don't play LDR here. I can recommend actually 2 items. Either the Yuntal Wild Arrows, this item is fine, really good for damage. And yeah, if they just are healthy and not tanky in terms of armor, then this is the build. Or if you really think you need a bit of like more tankiness, you just go with this crit item instead for 100% crit. Shield bow is great. Next patch as well. Right now it's quite weak, the shield, but next patch will be much better. So yeah, that is pretty much it. That is how I look at the items from Split 2. I don't think I can debate with anyone other ideas. I feel like I've tried everything almost. The only thing that I haven't tried is like Hail of Blade Yasuo or something in terms of runes. Besides that, I've tried Items Rush, I tried most runes, and this is just my opinion of what's best. Anyway, that was it. Thank you guys for watching until now. This is pretty much just my opinion, and I wouldn't say that I'm 100% correct, but from my experience and my gameplay, this feels the best for me. You guys are open to play whatever you like and whatever you prefer. League is not necessarily a simple game, so builds like this can always be debated, but I do believe that the synergies between IE and Phantom Dancer, just first 1-2 items, just feel like a complete build for Yasuo. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and good luck on the Rift, guys. See ya.